Today we are going to wrap this up with what I call the 13 virtues of meaningful marketing. And this lecture kind of has a genesis and a backstory to it. So I was out at Eureka Ranch working with my old friend Doug a few years back, and when we were wrapping things up, it was a Thursday night, it was late, I was flying back home the next morning, but we hadn't really had a chance to sit down and just chill, and so we grabbed a couple of Cokes and sat down in the Eureka room there and just started chatting. And since the last time I had been out, a bust of Ben Franklin had appeared over the top of the fireplace mantle. And so I asked him, I said, well, where'd you get that? And he goes, so I was up in Boston, and I found this thing, and it's really cool. And then he said something curious. He said, have you ever heard about Franklin's 13 virtues? And I said, no, never heard of that. And he goes, let me tell you this story, it's kind of cool. So he said, so when Ben was 16 years old, he said, I conceived a bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection. That's kind of heady stuff for a 16-year-old. And so, he wanted to be morally perfect. How do you do that? So he said, I want to live without fault. I think I know the difference between right and wrong. But he found that task was far more difficult than what he had imagined. So he concluded that contrary habits had to be broken and good ones acquired and established before we can have any dependence on improved conduct. In other words, got to get rid of the bad habits, replace them with good habits, and then you got to shout. So, what were you going to work on? That was the question. So he thought it would be wise not to distract my attention by attempting all at once, but to fix my attention on one at a time. And so he looked at a calendar and said, okay, so we got 52 weeks in a year. That's 4 cycles of 13. So let's come up with 13 things that I can work on that would help me achieve moral perfection. And then throughout the year, I'll rotate every single week so that over the course of 13 weeks, I'll have worked on each of these things once, 4 times over the course of the year. And so he built this thing out, and he did it for the rest of his life. And so the 13 virtues that he identified that he thought would help him lead to moral perfection were these: temperance and silence, order and resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice and moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and humility. Pretty good list. So this list and this work played a pretty significant role in American history, it turns out. So when the Founding Fathers were all gathered in Philadelphia trying to come up with the first Articles of Confederation, there was a lot of anger. It was a hot summer. They had been locked in Philadelphia for a while trying to work out the Articles of Confederation, and they just weren't seeing eye to eye. And at one particular week, they had been working, and it had got very acrimonious, and so there was a lot of anger in the room. Friday comes, and Washington and the New York delegation say, you know what, we're out of here. And Jefferson and the Virginia delegation then go, well, if you're out of here, we're out of here. And so, things were breaking down. That particular week, while all of this debate was going on, Franklin had been working on silence. And so he didn't say a word. He just sat and listened to all of it. Never said a word. But finally he decides, I need to do something here. So he takes his cane and he taps it on the floor. Tap, tap, tap. Everybody stops and turns to him and he says, gentlemen, we must all hang together, or most certainly we will all be hung separately. And with that little dose of reality brought back into the room, they sat down, got it done, and then that eventually turned into the United States Constitution. So as we were talking that night, Doug and I wondered, could you do the same thing with marketing? And when I say marketing, I'm really talking about, business in general. But we couched it in terms of marketing. How could you, if you wanted to arrive at marketing perfection, what would be the 13 things that you would work on over the course of your lifetime? And so we pulled out a whiteboard and we started writing things up on the board. And at about 4 a.m., we finally settled on our 13. And so I'd like to share with you today those 13 things that we identified, that I truly believe that if you worked on these things over your lifetime, you would not only be a better marketer, a better business person, but you'd be a better human being. So let's jump in. Virtue number 1, learn. Every week become quantifiably smarter regarding your customers and your vocational craft. Learning takes time. Doctors, lawyers, accountants, nurses, they all have to continually go back to training. You? No. Once you graduate and you've got that diploma on the wall, you don't have to do any more learning if you don't want to. But if you choose that route, you'll be obsolesced in 5 years. Learning, you have to continually stay on top of it. You have to make learning something that becomes part of your daily routine. There was a study done by Dr. Stamp that was quite interesting, where they were teaching adults about new products, showing them a new product concept. And then they were tested on their learning a week later. How much of that did they remember? And those that had the least prior knowledge about something coming in had the most knowledge coming out. Now, why is that the case? Because they came in with an open mind. They didn't have preconceived notions. And that's a really important lesson, because oftentimes when we go into our job, when we start our job, we're filled with ideas. Oh boy, we could do this and we could do this. But then over time, you bounce the idea off somebody and they said, no, such and such won't like that. And, oh yeah, we tried something like that in the past and that didn't work. And so you get beat into this box and you never look outside the box anymore. But the world is changing, folks, and we've got to be open. The best skill of any person in business is to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn things as things change. You just think about what ChatGPT has done just in the past little bit. And that is going to continue to evolve, and that's going to have huge impacts on lots of different businesses and lots of different jobs. And so, we've got to stay open. We can't put ourselves in the box and discount things because we don't think that it fits in the box that we perceive the box to be. So learning, you have to make learning something that you do every day. The more you know, the less you'll grow. Essentially, what you want to do in business every day is to go every morning and say, today I can do better than I did yesterday. And the only way that's going to happen is if you know more. So be open to letting go of where you are. Learn innocently. Talk a lot, try a lot, read a lot. Spend time every day reading and trying to get smarter about things. It doesn't have to be about your craft all the time, but stay up on what's going on in science. What's Elon Musk working on? I know you probably don't like him, but that's okay. The guy's pretty smart. What's he working on? What's Microsoft doing? What's Google doing? What's Apple doing? Those things are going to change our lives, and we need to be aware of them and see how can we take pieces of those kinds of things and apply them to our businesses as well, because best practices can be shared across industries. There might be something that you can learn great about the ice cream category that applies to whatever it is you're working on. So stay open and learn and just try to explore things. Try to find new learning. Make that something you do every single day. Virtue number 2, pioneer. lead your marketplace and leave copying to those without the brains or the courage to be original. You know, if you are the first to market with a new product idea, you have a 100% chance of capturing that market because nothing exists like it. Whatever you identified as the size of that potential target audience, it's all yours. But if you are second or third or fourth to market, don't delude yourself that the market is still that big. It's not, because a lot of people will have found that first product and they're never leaving. And so the market size on average, if you're the second to market, has collapsed to only 71% of what you think that market should be. And if you go down to if you're third to market, it's only about 58%. And if you're fourth to market, it's only about half. So, you know, if you gotta lead, you gotta pioneer. You know, we used to test this stuff when I was at Disney. And if you came up with a brand new movie idea, you know, something that was original, never been seen before, you know, you had whatever your box office was, you know, that's 100%. But then if you came back with sequels, and this doesn't apply to all movies because, you know, Star Wars, every sequel does better. A lot of the Avenger movies, every sequel does better. Harry Potter movies, every sequel did better. But on average, you know, if you're making a Meet the Fockers or Meet the Family, you know, Little Fockers, or Dumb and Dumber and Dumb and Dumber 2, you know, whatever that first one posted, you can anticipate that the second one would be about 67% of what the original box office was, and the third would be about 43%. Because we've seen it, we've been there, done there. You know, Dumb and Dumber, great movie first time. Second, you know, been there, done that, seen that. Anchorman, great movie. Anchorman 2, no. So, you know, we've seen it. People want original ideas, and so we've got to, you know, work on things that are different, better, special. You know, when we pioneer, the number one wish of buyers and resellers in every category on earth is to make incremental sales. What did we do last year? What are we doing this year? Have we grown our sales? That's how every business on earth measures itself. So, how do we generate incremental sales? Well, the number one drivers of consumer recall are new news. How do we tell them something new? So, you want to be the first, you want to be the only, you want to make legal claims because customers love news and customers love hope. Those are the two things that you can leverage. Give me new news and give me hope. And that's how you're going to grow your business. No one ever made it into the Business Hall of Fame on a record of line extensions. Leaders create new markets, new categories, and do stuff that matters, said Tom Peters. So, a couple of stories. So, back when, a few years ago, ABC, the network ABC, had a television program that they ran for a short period of time that was called American Inventors. And it was kind of a mix between The Voice and Shark Tank, where you had, in fact, Shark Tank now uses the set that was originally created for American Inventors. And so you had these inventors that were up on the stage, and people would come in and present their idea to them, pitch them their idea. And then these judges, rather than trying to decide how they were going to steal these poor people's businesses from them, like they do on Shark Tank, they instead had to decide whether or not they wanted to take this person on and mentor them to help them take their product to market. And then they would, in subsequent episodes, they would show them, you know, working with them to get it to market eventually. And so, only lasted one season, and Doug Hall, he was one of the 4 judges. And so when the season gets over with, he gets inundated with calls and letters and people emailing saying, hey, you know, I've got this idea, I saw you on the show, would you help me, would you help me? And so he asked me to come out and spend a week with him, actually 2 weeks, where we invited some of those people into the ranch and we sat down and tried to work with them and help them develop their ideas a little further. And so I want to share with you a couple of those ideas. First one, the pitch burst, the reverse dunk tank. And when we had them fill out their yellow card to describe the idea briefly, What they wrote on the yellow card for the benefits was it had advantages over a real dunk tank because it conserved water, it was far less expensive, and it saved time. Problem, a dunk tank is a lot more fun than getting a bucket of water dumped on your head. So, the only time that's really going to pay attention is if you're trying to conserve water in a drought period, or, if you had some other very unique place where you could do it. And so, not a big idea. And so we started, doing our stimulus response brainstorming. How do we find other uses for this? How can we tweak it? How can we make it better? Because again, recall, when you're going through an innovation, you have to go through these cycles of learning. The first one out the gate usually isn't the right idea. And so you've got to tweak it until you finally find the right solution. And so we started exploring what other target audiences could we use the pitch burst on. And so, where would be a place where you could take a pitch burst that you couldn't take a dunk tank? Well, the obvious answer is indoors, right? Can't take a dunk tank indoors. So then we started exploring where indoors might there be a role for somebody wanting to get a bucket of water dumped on their head. And that led to ideas for what about bars and restaurants and adult beverage companies? Beer. And what if we went down and tested it at some bars in Florida where you've got a whole bunch of 20-somethings that are having a good time in a warm climate and want to have fun and might be attracted to trying to dump buckets of waters on their friends' heads. And so they took it down to some bars and restaurants in Florida, down on the beach, tested it, worked great. Miller Beer bought the rights to the pitch burst for $1 million. So turned out to be not so dumb of an idea after all. Second guy that came in was Carl Brown. He had invented the multi-purpose accessory sink, which was a sink that sat on top of your toilet, and when you flush the toilet, the multi-purpose accessory sink would funnel normally wasted clean water that would go down into the drain, back up into this bowl, and you could conserve this water and promote sanitation. So it's a toilet sink. Anybody here on board for that? Yeah, not a big idea. So, again, we had to figure out something else to do here. So, new target audiences, new usage occasions, new problems that we could solve. First idea, well, what about if you took this to, green hotels? It's like, nah, that's still, people washing their hands in toilet water. But who else needs water that probably doesn't care where the water comes from? Well, Fido might. Dogs need water. A lot of dogs will go drink out of the toilet. But that's still kind of gross because, then they come up and lick your face and, they just got through taking a slurp of toilet water. But what else in the house needs water that really doesn't matter where it comes from? Plants. And so the multi-purpose accessory sink morphed into a self-watering plant pot. And you can now go down and buy those at Home Depot and Lowe's. So again, you got to tweak the idea sometimes. The first shot out the gate usually isn't going to be the big winner. Sometimes you got to tweak and try to figure out how you're going to make it a success. It's easy to find courage to change when your survival is at risk. But real courage, real leadership is when you pursue change when you don't have to. I mean, the classic story of that is Reed Hastings at Netflix. He decides to take on Blockbuster with his home delivery mail order movies. Kicking butt, taking names, huge. He was putting Blockbuster in a world of hurt. And then suddenly one morning he wakes up and says, you know what, screw this mail and stuff, we're going to go to streaming. And people thought he had lost his mind. What? What? We've got this huge business going, it's going great, why are you going to screw it up? Well, he knew that streaming was going to take over. But at the time, streaming was still in its infancy. Most people didn't have strong enough Wi-Fi in their house or internet service in their house in order to stream effectively. It was getting there, it was close, But still, a lot of times when you tried to stream something, you'd be watching a movie and it would stop and the little wheel would come up and start spinning on you, and you had to wait 20 seconds until the movie started again. That was annoying. But he knew that problem was getting fixed. And so we changed the model. Fast forward 10 years now. Netflix is the largest movie studio on earth, bigger than Disney, bigger than Warner Brothers, bigger than Universal, bigger than Fox, combined. Combined. Talk about a business model. Talk about leadership. That's what real leadership is, when you have the courage to change when your survival's not at risk. Easy to change when things are going bad. Not as easy to change when things are going good. Virtue 3, overtness. Let a customer say no because what you offer them doesn't apply to them. But never let us customers say no because they don't understand what the heck it is you're trying to sell them. You gotta be clear, you gotta be overt. You know, if you track the survival of 900 new products, being obvious about the benefit, you have a 75% greater odds of success. You're gonna work less, you're gonna sell more. And that's all we're trying to do here at the end of the day. If you can align the name with the benefit, you double recall. Ass, kick, and rage, and Cajun hot sauce. Got it. Got it. Name aligns to benefit. You know, that's what we want to do. If we use pictures, we want to have the pictures communicate the benefit. You know, here's a picture of a game, perfection. And if you go walk down the game aisle, stop and look at the fronts of all the boxes of the kids' games. And you're going to see that in most situations, the photo that they're going to show on the front of it is what I call the gotcha moment. You know, when the board explodes or when you're trying to play Operation. And it's fun when you can perfectly put the leg bone in, but it's more fun when you touch it and you suddenly, the lights go on, his nose is flashing and the sirens are going and the beeps are going off because you're killing the patient. That's when it's fun. And so you want to try to communicate the benefit with pictures as well. Now, here's the story time. So, Doug has a little house up on Prince Edward Island in Canada that he likes to go up to for the summers, and every once in a while I'll go up there with him. And one summer we're driving out to the house. We just landed from the airport. We're driving out to the house, and we see this sign on the side of the road. And it's about 6 o'clock in the evening, and he looked at me and I looked at him and said, "What's that?" No, neither one of us knew. And so, I was like, "What's Epicurean?" And he goes, "I don't know." But he saw wine, and Doug likes wine, so he said, "Well, let's stop in and see what's going on at 6 o'clock. Maybe it's a store we could pick up some stuff and take it back to the house and cook it up." So we walk in, and turns out that it's not a little, fancy food store and a wine store. It's actually a restaurant. And so we walk in and we look around, and there's not a soul there. There's not one single customer. This nice young man greets us at the door, and we thought, "Oh, what the heck, it's 6 o'clock, let's go ahead and have dinner." So he seats us, and he brings us out our menus, and, we're chatting for a few minutes, and, it gets to be about 6:15, 6:20 now. There's still no customers. And so, he takes our order and brings us out our food, and now it's, 6:45, getting close to 7 o'clock. Still no customers. And so we struck up a conversation, and we said, "Pull up a chair." And so turns out that the young man that met us at the door was not only the maitre d' and our waiter for the night, he was also our chef and the owner of the restaurant. And he'd been open for a month, and we were his fourth customer. Fourth customer in a month. And he is in total panic mode. We told him what we do for a living, and explained to him, said, your sign is probably a lot of your problem. And he goes, "What do you mean? I paid $1,000 for that sign." And we go, we know, but Epicurean food and wine, nobody knows what that is. And he says, "Well, people know what wine is. And he said, yeah, but nobody knows what procuring food is. and it looks really expensive. And so we said, you know, what's your vision for this thing? And so we had him tell us about himself. Turns out, you know, he had just graduated from the New York Culinary Arts School. He had spent 3 years in Paris working at some of the finest restaurants in Paris. And he'd come back to the island now and wanted to open up this restaurant that had kind of a, you know, fine dining feel, but it was, again, elegant and casual. And so we said, let's put that on the sign. He said, I can't afford to change the sign. I've already spent $1,000. I said, let's just take a piece of wood that we can put screw in over the top of the bottom. So we can screw it in over the Epicurean food and wine and explain what this place is in an overt way. So the new sign just says restaurant. Casual, elegant island dining. Boom. Confusion isn't a success strategy. And, you know, with that change, people started coming. Oh, we got a new restaurant. Let's go try it out. And the food was amazing. And so about a year later, we're back on the island. We drive by. The parking lot is jammed. And so we stopped and walked in. And the guy comes walking up to us and he grabs us and he kisses us on the cheeks and says, you guys saved my life. Thank you. You know, he said, I am now booked out with reservations 6 months in advance for every single table. But that night he squoze us in and we got a free meal and it was wonderful. So totally worth the free consulting. So anyway, you want to be overt. Virtue number 4, clarity. Strive for self-evident clarity in all of your communications. You know, as we talked about in the last lecture, if you can be simple and easy to understand, if you can communicate at a 5th grade level, you're going to win. You know, if you can have a specific numeric benefit, you increase your odds of success by 52%. Crest Whitetrix whitens teeth 5 times better than the leading paint-on whitening gel. Miracle-Gro grows plants twice as big. Abreva cuts cold sore healing time in half. Now you can shave your legs half as often with Nair. You have to tell your story. Another little shop up on the island, it's called Island Winds. And Peter Baker owns this store. And his father had actually opened it up years before. And they had these wonderful wind chimes that were built for the North Atlantic, you know, in that area. Because, you know, you've got a lot of salt in the air, you've got wind blowing all the time. And so, you know, if you just use non-treated metals, they'll rust and corrode very quickly. But his dad had figured out a way to use steel, stainless steel and wires and bolts that wouldn't corrode so that they would last a long time. They were very high quality. You know, in the first 10 years that his father had owned it, it had 10 years of growth. But as with anything, you know, when someone else sees someone being successful, they're going to come in with, you know, try to compete with a cheaper product that was sourced out of China that looks the same but doesn't perform the same, doesn't last as long. And so he had 10 years of compounded declines. And Peter now was about at the point where he wanted to give up. So, you know, as he told us this story, it was fascinating. And, you know, we looked around in his store, we said, you need to tell the story. You can't communicate that to every single person. You need to tell that story so that people can see why your products are different, better, special. So we helped him craft a simple story for his products. Rebranded them Nor'easter Chimes, made for the North Atlantic, out of real steel, wire and bolts, not spring breeze chises, and they had an on-off switch, which is important in a place where the wind's blowing all the time, because you know, a wind chime sounds cool during the day when it's tinkle, 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 but at night, outside your bedroom window, it sounds like a freight train. So his dad had figured out a way to lock them down, and so they wouldn't tingle at night, and you know, that was part of their different, better, special. And happy to say that Peter and the chimes are still there and doing better, and you know, because he's telling a story now. He has a brand, he has something that identifies why his chimes are different, better, special versus the cheap Chinese knockoffs at the places down the street. Now, when you don't have a quantifiable advantage, then the root cause of your business problem may not be the marketing, but that might be your salvation. So, story time. few years ago, after I'd written my first book, I get a call to participate in this show that was on NPR that was about helping small businesses, and it would run on Saturdays. And this guy hosted it. It was kind of like Car Guys is in today's world, but it was just targeted at small businesses. And about once a month, he'd bring me on to do a marketing minute. And so we'd take a random phone call from someone on the line. They had about a minute to tell me about their marketing problem. And then I had 2, 3, 4 minutes to kind of give them advice and solutions. And so one day, I did it because it was fun, because you never knew what was coming in, so I kind of had to be on my toes. One day we get a phone call from this guy that owns a tire store in Tupelo, Mississippi. And he explains to me that it was a family operation. His dad had opened up this store 40 years ago. And at first they were pretty much the only tire store in Tupelo. But as the town grew and other things came in, Walmart selling tires, and they've got a Big O selling tires, and a Les Schwab selling tires, and you've got a Goodyear store down the street. So there's a lot of competition, and sales have been going down. He said, we're all selling the same tires. We've all got the same major brands, and I don't know what to do, because price. We don't want to compete on price, and I just don't know what to do. I said, well, what do you do for marketing now? And he said, well, we put balloons out on Saturday. Balloons out on Saturday? I want you to remember this now, and notice as you're driving around the rest of your life, whenever you drive past a tire store, look at how many of them have balloons outside. It's gonna blow your mind. And I don't know why anybody thinks, well, let's put balloons out. That's going to draw in those customers. Man, they're going to love that balloon outside on the road. What? They all do it. Someone has written a book on marketing for tire stores, and it says, put balloons out on the side of the road. And it blows my mind. But anyway, that was basically their marketing. So how am I going to fix this? So I said, you said you were Tupelo, Mississippi, correct? And he goes, yes, sir. I said, isn't that big NASCAR country? He goes, oh, yes, sir. We got a major track over in Hattiesburg, not too far away, where they run the NASCAR races. Everybody down here loves racing. I said, okay. So can you invest $1,000 into your business? He goes, yeah, I can do that. That's about the cost of a couple sets of tires. I said, all right. So here's what I want you to do. How many bays do you have in your garage? He said, we got 4 bays. I said, all right, I want you to shut down the 3 furthest away from your viewing room. And he goes, what? I said, stay with me for a minute. I want you to shut them all down. And I only want you to open the one that's closest to your waiting room. You got a window for your waiting room, right? You say, yeah, of course we do. Everybody does. It's okay. Now, I want you to go out and buy pit crew uniforms, NASCAR pit crew uniforms for all of the guys in your shop. And when a car pulls in, instead of having 4 guys all working on a 4-car slowly, I want you to have 4 guys all working on 1 car fast. And I want you to put up a timer out in your bay. And when a car pulls in, they start the clock, and they try to flip that car as quick as a NASCAR team would. And then when they're done, they shut off the clock, and every time they set a new record for fastest time, you give them all a $10 bonus. Can you do that? And he says, that's crazy. I love it. Yeah, let's try it. I'll go for that. I said, all right, so, give it a shot. Call me back a couple months. Let me know how it's going. And I said that to everyone, and I never really expected anybody to call back, but he calls back. About 3 months later, he calls back, and there's this noise going on. It's a Saturday afternoon, and he goes, Eric, you're not going to believe it. He said, when we started doing this, the local paper came over and did a big story on us, and now we got people lining up their cars to try to get in here. Police are out front telling people they got to move because they're blocking off traffic out on the road. My waiting room has got 40 people in it, all just coming in for the show. They're just eating their popcorn and drinking a Coke and watching the show out in the garage. And whenever the clock starts winding down, we have the record posted in the window. And whenever the clock starts winding down, they all start yelling at my guys, come on, come on, come on, you can do it, come on, come on. And if they set the record, it's like Mardi Gras in here. They're throwing popcorn in the air, they're all high-fiving each other and cheering. It's crazy. And I said, okay. So we shut down 3 out of your 4 bays. How's business? He said, business is doubled. So there's a really important principle here. If you can't differentiate on product, tire's a tire, right? They all got the same brands. Then you have to differentiate on service. Let me say that one more time. If you can't differentiate on product, you have to differentiate on service. Your service has to be the thing that makes you different, better, special. And to be different, better, special, you got to go big. You can't just make incremental little changes. It's not going to matter. You got to go big. You got to be unique. You got to be different, better, special. Virtue 5, focus. Eliminate the irrelevant. So in ads that were tested by Dr. Stamp, he looked at ads that just had the meaningful information, and then he used ads that the advertising agencies had gone wild on. And what he found was that purchase intent declined when you got really creative. You know, people just wanted straightforward information. It was kind of like this. If you had 2 ads and you were doing them for Florida orange juice. So in the first ad, it was just Florida orange juice, 100% pure orange from Florida trees. You know, that you just can't pick a better juice, Florida orange juice. Straightforward, no extraneous information. In the second ad, this thing had like the Sistine Chapel and Jesus and fingers pointing at each other. And the copy was God's greatest gift. And it had like a hand with an orange holding it. It looked like it was God's hand. And the copy was the moon, the sun, the stars. God's glory. Orange. The gift and nectar of heaven. Taste it, drink it, enjoy it. Feel it's nourishing not only your body but your spirit. Oranges from Florida. God's perfect nectar. Thank you very much. Yeah, so, yeah, you don't want to do that. You just want to be straightforward. People just want the information. Tell me how it's different, better, special. Don't just put a bunch of creative crap around it. Be specific, be straightforward, focused. Do one thing great. If you can do one thing great, you're going to increase your odds significantly. If you are making toothpaste and you suddenly discover that it also works very well as a hemorrhoid cream, don't try to market it as toothpaste and hemorrhoid cream. You know, it drives me crazy when I walk into Walmart, and you can find it. If you walk into Walmart and you'll see there's a shampoo brand there called Mane and Tail. It's horse shampoo. It was made for horses. It's made for horses. But apparently if women use it, it'll help make their hair smoother and shinier. Well, that's great. But don't sell me horse shampoo in the same bottle that you sell the horse shampoo to horse breeders. Put it in a different bottle. Make a new brand for it. But it's called Mane and Tail inside of Walmart. Go take a look. The power of focus. So there's another little lady up on the island, Granny, who has a little store that makes jams. And as you drive closer to her store, she's got these little white picket signs that say, Granny's, stop in, berries and jams made fresh here on the island, fresh fruit, you know, free samples. And you walk into her store and she's got these tables laid out with all these different jams. She had 24 different flavors of jams laid out. And you could walk in, she had crackers and bread, and you could, you know, slather on some stuff and take a bite. You could literally have lunch standing there sampling all of these different jams. And Granny, she was a crusty old soul. You know, she'd grown up and lived on the island. She's about 75 years old. And I love old people because they shoot from the hip. They tell it straight. They don't try to BS you. And so we were talking to Granny, And, she said, just pisses me off. People come in and they eat all my jams and they don't buy anything. And she was a savvy old coot. She had a little notepad next to the cash register where she would make a mark when somebody sampled a product, and then she would had a second column where people would actually made a purchase. And she could compare, see how many people had sampled versus how many people bought. And so, she was explaining her problem to us, and we said, we think your problem might be that you've got too many options. 24 jams, and they're all delicious, but that's just too many to choose from. I mean, people come in and they can't make a decision. We got to help them make a decision. So instead of having 24 jams out, let's reduce it to 6. And then hopefully that'll change your fortunes. You can pick your best 6 and put the rest of them away. So she did. And she ran the test for about a month. And when we went back in and said, if when we had 6, when we had 24 flavors out, 2% of the people that sampled bought. When they reduced it to 6, 12% bought. So 6x on the sales by reducing the focusing and eliminating the irrelevant. So we want to try to be as focused as possible and not give people too many options, because we know when it gets into cognitive purchase, your brain shuts down if you got too many options to try to sort through. Here's a store with no focus. This poor little shop. It sells anti-books, anti-cards, groceries, ice cream, Coca-Cola, gifts, convenience store, meat, and my favorite thing, etc. What is etc.? Boy, I've always wanted to go buy etc. This poor little store doesn't know what it is. It's trying to be everything to everyone. One other sign that's critical to this little store: for sale. Yeah. You got to do one thing great. You can't try to be all things to all people. Pick a lane. Ernest Hemingway had a really interesting quote. The most essential gift for a good writer is a built-in shock-proof poop detector. This is the writer's radar, and all great writers have had it. Now you'll notice that the word poop is in red, because that's not the word that Hemingway used when he originally wrote this passage. He had a more descriptive word for poop in there. And when I originally built this lecture, I had the original text. And my first time I gave this lecture was down at BYU. And so, I gave the lecture and I'm done, and I'm walking back across campus over to the business building, and I get a phone call on my cell. And it says, hey, I understand you did a lecture today. Yeah, this is administration. I was wondering if you could pop by with your slideshow. Yeah, sure. So, I'm thinking, boy, word travels fast on this campus. They probably want me to do a devotional for the whole school because this thing was so great. And so I walk into administration, and I walk up, and there's this old guy, dour looking face and suit, and he says, could I see your PowerPoint, please? So I hand him my thumb drive, and he pops it up, and he starts clicking through it, and he gets to this slide, and he stops. And you hear this little gasp. Ugh. I go, what? He goes, you can't say that word here. What? You can't say that word here. I go, what do you mean? That word, and he's pointing at it. And I go, I didn't say it. Hemingway said it. The greatest writer in American history. And he goes, well, you're going to have to change it. You're going to have to take this slide out. I said, I don't want to take the slide out. It's kind of an important slide, talking about focusing and editing and eliminating. And he goes, then you're going to have to change it. I said, well, what do you want me to change it to? He says, I don't know. And he's getting flustered now. He goes, I don't know, maybe defecation. I go, a good writer has a built-in shock-proof defecation detector? And he goes, no, that doesn't work. He says, oh, just change it to poop then. So I changed it to poop. And I've left it at poop because I want you to know you should be very happy that you're not going to school there. So anyway, edit and eliminate. Virtue number 6, credibility. Continuously enhance customer trust in you, your company, and your brand. Yankelovitz study found that 93% of people don't have confidence in the advertising messages put out by major corporations. 93% think that advertising is a load of hooey. Wow. Well, how did that happen? It happened because people are making claims that don't build trust. They're just putting things out there with a bunch of happy people. They're not telling them how the product fits in their life to make their life better. And so, as a result, there's a lot of distrust. You know, the same thing happens in the media. 64% of people now in the media don't believe that the news media gets their facts straight. That's up 40% in the last 40 years. You know, back in the 1960s and 70s, the voice of news in the United States was Walter Cronkite. And he ended every broadcast by saying, and that's the way it is, this, and he'd say the date, good night. And that was the way it was. You know, there was no, fake news, and there was no, radicalization and ideas and stuff. It was straightforward. And so, you have to build trust, as we've talked about several times. Trust is the ultimate emotional connection that we have to make to consumers, and we can't do anything to violate their trust. Credibility comes through trust. Credibility is about telling your story. Credibility is about the reason to believe part of our brand strategy. What makes it possible for you to deliver this benefit? When we have synergy between our benefit and our credibility, between our benefit and our reason why, we have a 74% greater odds of success. Virtue 7, authenticity. Communicate with honesty and integrity. In a study of 1,000 Americans asking what do they want to most be known for, being authentic wins by a landslide. I had a hard time with this study because, I just fit all 4 categories so well, especially that be a good looking one. So, no, kidding. So, but, being authentic, be yourself. That's the key here. When we were testing, there was a really cool test that Dr. Stamp did, where he was testing, telling the truth. And so he ran a concept test. There was new product concept, new idea. He gave the people the concept, but he had them scored on a 1 to 10 scale. And, pre-purchase, here's the concept. How likely would you be to purchase? And on a 10-point scale, that new idea came in at an 8.9. Pretty strong. So then he gave them the product and let them try it. It did exactly what it said that it would do in the concept statement. He then had them test at the end. Okay, now that you've heard about it, now that you've actually tried it, how likely would you be to buy it? And it came in at a 9.1. Pretty much the same number, built a little bit. So then he took a second idea, a second concept, but instead of telling the truth, he dumbed it down. He took the same idea for the product, but he didn't say exactly what it would do. He claimed a lesser benefit. And when he tested that product, it only got a 3.2 purchase intent. He then let them try the product, the same product that the other tests had let them use. And then he did the post-purchase intent score there. It only went from a 3.2 up to a 6.6. So in other words, they left a third of their sales on the table by not telling the truth, by not having promise, expectation, and the customer experience aligned. That's why it's also important. Promise has got to align with expectation and the customer experience. That's when you build a brand. And if you set low expectations, consumers will respond similarly. Take pride in what you do. Back when we were doing the invention team at Procter & Gamble, we did something that nobody even knew we did. I don't even think senior management knew we did it. But when we created the boxes, on the bottom flap of the box, we would have everybody that worked on the project sign their names. And then we printed that on the bottom of the box. You know, nobody ever opens up the bottom of a cake box. But if you had, you would have found the names of all the people who had worked on the project. You know, because you want to take pride in what you do. You want people to know, you know, if my name's going to be on that thing, I want to make sure that it's good. Virtue number 8, demonstrate. Let your product, service, and ideas talk for themselves. You know, as we talked in the last lecture, if you have a pedigree of material made by the people who make this or made by Apple, you know, you have a pretty good credibility bump. If you give testimonials from satisfied customers, you can get a pretty good credibility bump. But nothing beats the first person experience. Let me touch it. Let me feel it. Let me try it. You know, GM had a really interesting project. It was before its time, unfortunately. But back in the late 1980s, they ran a campaign where they called it the 24-hour test drive. And they had looked at the car buying experience and said, you know, a lot of people hate the sitting and driving around on a test drive with the salesperson sitting next to them pushing buttons. They're just trying not to wreck the car. And so they said, here, take it home. Try it for 24 hours. And so they would drive it home and they'd pull up in the driveway and the wife would come out of the door and say, what did you do? And he'd go, no, just a test drive. Come on. Kids, everybody in the cars. Let's go to dinner. So they all pile in. They're all driving down the road. And, you know, you see your neighbor out watering the grass. And he goes, hey, nice car. Yeah. And then you pull in the restaurant. Everybody comes piling out. And somebody walking by goes, hey, nice car. And then you drive it to work the next morning. And one of your coworkers says, hey, nice car. Are you going to take that car back the next day and throw the keys at the sales clerk and say, nah, I decided against it? No. You know, it was very successful in selling cars. Problem was, it was before its time. It was before, you know, all of the trackers and equipment that you could put in cars to track things. And so, you know, if you wanted to steal a car and you had a 24-hour head start, you could get a long ways away. So there was a lot of cars disappearing, unfortunately, and so they had to kill the program. You know, now some car dealers are reintroducing it because, you know, now they've got the technology where they know how to track the car down. So, you know, sometimes, again, things change. Just because it didn't work in the past doesn't mean it won't work now. Demonstrate. And this is a really important principle for you. Demonstrate to others, and I call it the butt head principle. Your head is where your butt is. Change where you physically spend your time and you will change your impact on the business. You know, as I've said, the people who line the halls. You don't want to be one of those people. You don't want to be the people who line the halls. You want to be the people that are making things happen, that are doing things, that are making things that'll change the course of your company. But if you're sitting in your office staring at a computer screen, that ain't going to happen. You got to get out and talk to your clients. You got to get out and visit customers. You got to go out and see your manufacturing plants and see how things are made. And you got to sit down with your customers and talk and find out how can you make your product better for them and how are you going to make their life even better. That's how you change your impact on the business. Virtue number 9, persistence. Never, ever, ever, ever give up when you're pursuing the right thing in the right way. You know, it takes multiple exposures to advertising before it even clicks into your head. On average, you've got to show somebody the ad 3 times before they even remember having seen it. And in sales, oftentimes you have to present your product to a buyer 4.5 times before they'll buy it. You know, and how many people have the guts to go back and pitch the same thing 4, 5, 6 times? But that's what it takes. So, you know, first instincts versus 6-month behavior. There was a test done by Dr. Stamp where he showed a concept and then he got their purchase intent on the 1 to 10 scale. And over 1,000 people were in the study. 800 of the 809 customers that hit 0, and 246 hit 10. So most people didn't like the product. So if you got a concept test back like that, you would have killed it immediately, right? Well, they then checked these people 6 months later to see who had bought and who hadn't. Of the 809 who'd hit 0, 144 of them, 1 in 6, had actually bought it. Of the 246 that had hit the 10, 128, a little over half of those had bought it. So, what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story here is that first instinct oftentimes isn't the greatest predictor. Sometimes, if you believe in the idea, you got to stick with it. Despite what you might have heard, if you really believe in it, you got to stick with it, because sometimes it just takes more and more exposure to it than getting the first instinct. You got to repeatedly show it to people, and then it clicks in. Oh, that's what that does. Yeah. So you gotta measure on your personal gut as well. A couple of stories. So Kleenex had developed a technology where they could put lotion on a Kleenex. And, the brand people, after they got this, looked at it and said, well, we don't want to cannibalize our own Kleenex business, so let's take this and target it at a new usage occasion. And so they took it and said, we're going to make this a makeup remover, because apparently, I guess if you got lotion on a tissue, it'll help you remove makeup. They put it out, huge failure. Nobody buys it. And so they come back and they go, well, gee, what are we going to do with this now? And somebody said, well, when people get a cold, oftentimes the Kleenex, they'll get rubbed, raw underneath their nose. I wonder if we treated it with aloe. When they blow their nose, they get a little bit of treatment on their to help it keep it from getting raw. And so they re-released the product as Kleenex Cold Care. Huge success. Grew the business by about 15%. Didn't cannibalize their core business at all. And they can charge a higher price for these, so that it turned out to be a huge win. So again, sometimes the first one idea out the gate isn't the right idea. Sometimes you got to tweak. Another story. DuPont had come up with a new product that was called Kevlar. And it was designed originally to be a replacement for steel belts in tires. And so they made these tires and they took out the steel belts, they put in these Kevlar belts, and it made the tire virtually indestructible. You could be in those parking lots that have like the razor grates on the backside so you can't sneak away without paying. You could drive right over those suckers and tires just fine. They went out in the back lot and they started firing bullets at them. You couldn't destroy it with a bullet. I mean, talk about cool. But the problem was, when you made a set of 4 tires with this Kevlar in them, the set of 4 tires was about $4,000. Nobody could afford the tires. And they were solving a problem that really doesn't exist. Because when a tire fails, it's usually because the tread is worn out, not because of the steel belts wearing out. So, the Fortune magazine wrote an article about it. They called it "The Miracle Without a Market." And he's talk about taking one in the heart when you're listening to that. So they went back and somebody said, "Wait a minute, didn't we shoot bullets at this thing?" They go, "Yeah." I said, "I wonder if maybe police and the military would like a flak jacket that would repel bullets." And so they pivoted to that, and it became the #1 profit center. So, again, sometimes first idea out the gate isn't the one. You just got to keep working at it until you finally get there. Virtue 10, measurement. Quantify your goals and your systems. Michelangelo, the greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high and we miss, it's that we aim too low and we reach it. I'll say that again. The greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, it's that it's too low and we make it. When this show's over and we meet St. Peter at the pearly gates. This is how I think it's all going to come down. St. Peter's going to step up and he's going to say, okay, let's watch your home movie. And you'll see a movie of your life. The pieces, the places, and the things that will torment you into eternity will be the times when you saw you had the opportunity to do something great, but you instead chose a lower road. You took the easy path. That's what will torment you into eternity. You know, most of you are very young. You know, try things. Take chances now. It's a lot easier to take a chance now when you're young than it is once you're older and you've got mortgage payments and house payments and kids to worry about. You know, if you try a new startup and it goes bankrupt, who cares? You got $12 in the bank anyway. It's not going to matter. So take the chance now because you'll regret it later if you don't. You know, if you have an opportunity to do something great, take it. Try it. Even if you fail, who cares? Everybody fails. There's not a person on earth that hasn't failed at something. Sometimes you learn a lot more through failure than you do through success. So, you know, just take chances. Don't miss opportunities. Take opportunities that look great and go for it. And try to do things great with your life because life is short. It's not going to last that long. Take chances and take opportunities now when you can try to grab that brass ring. Use data. You know, Dr. Deming, math without statistics is meaningless. Use data to help drive your decision making. You know, Dr. Deming found that 94% of all problems are due to poor systems. 94% of all problems in a business are due to poor systems. You know, when you get into a business and you see something going wrong, rather than trying to go, well, Johnny's not doing his job, maybe it's because the system that you've forced Johnny into working in isn't allowing him to do his job. You know, give people freedom. Give them the opportunity to use their heads. If they see a problem, let them fix it. You know, try to encourage change. You know, when I was at Procter & Gamble, one of the key measurements on your performance evaluation every year was what they measured and called a healthy dissatisfaction for the status quo, which basically meant that, you know, you're happy with where you are, but you're never happy to be there. You're always trying to improve. You're always trying to do something new. You're always trying to push the bar out just a little further. And so you need to kind of have that as part of your internal drive system, that you have a healthy dissatisfaction for the status quo, and you're always looking to solve problems first at the system level, because that's probably where it lies. If you have the relative probabilities of just showing the features of your product, you have a 10% chance to succeed. If you only show the benefits, you have a 29% chance. Reason to believe, the same. Just show a picture, an 18% chance of success. If you link reason to believe with the image, you have a 29% chance. If you link benefits and image, you have a 30% chance. Nothing changes basically. But if you link your benefit and reason to believe, you significantly increase your chances of success, which is why brand positioning is the centerpiece of all marketing. You've got to have a brand positioning. Target audience, benefit, reason why, and that's how you build a brand. That's how you find success. You know, if you measure inefficiencies, you know, take for example, if I was mailing a postcard to homes, 100% of the homes got the postcard, but only 60% will have remembered even getting it. Only 47% will have actually read it. Only 25% of those will have actually understood it. And only 7% would actually be in the target audience to purchase it. So that's 93% waste. We live in a day and age now where we don't have to do that anymore. We don't just randomly mail stuff to random homes. We have enough data that we can purchase now through all of our creepy ways of doing marketing that we can identify those 7 people and 7 more like them and 7 more like them and not have to waste our money on the other 93. You know, we need to take advantage of the tools that we have today available to us in this universe in order to target more effectively. We want to quantify every step in our customer and distribution pipeline. You know, for example, think about a patient in a hospital that needs a life-saving drug. Well, in order for that to happen, somebody had to invent it. Then they had to get approval from the FDA. And then once the FDA approved it, then doctors need to know that it actually exists. But to get a doctor, sometimes you got to go through the nurse because the doctor doesn't take the calls from the pharmaceutical reps. So the nurse has to tell the doctor, and even if the doctor does prescribe it, the insurance company has to approve it, or it'll never get to that patient. And any one of those valves, if they're shut down, the whole system is shut down. So always look to try to make sure that all the valves are open between you and your customer. There's nothing clogging up the system. Virtue 11, service. Dedicate yourself to serving the genuine needs of your customers. We measure quality in attention to detail. When we have synergy between our name, our graphics, and our communication, when everything is singing from the same hymnal, now's when we're cooking with gas. You know, there was a study done on corporate quality initiatives where some were focused on price reduction, some were focused on improving customer satisfaction, and some were a blend of the two. The only ones that correlated to company profit, to more return on asset, and to a higher stock price was improving customer satisfaction. And that's really important. Keep your focus on the consumer. They're the ones who are buying our products. They're the ones that are giving us their money. We can't cut ourselves to success. We've got to continually focus on customer satisfaction. You know, there was a study on bank customers that had a service problem. If it was handled well by the bank, 58% mentioned something to somebody and told a friend. Hey, you know, I had this problem with the bank, but they got it all fixed. They did a good job. If it was handled poorly, most suffered in silence. Only 16% told someone. But if it happened again, God help them. 47% would get up on bandboxes. They'll start posting stuff all over the internet. They'll make it their life goal to try to make this bank's life so miserable they'll wish that they'd never met him. Now, I know this from personal experience. Story time. So a few years ago, I went out to buy a new car for my son. And we get to the car dealer, and it was a brand new model. And the banks and the dealership, even the own manufacturer financing arms didn't have the details set up in their system yet. And so I was having problems getting financing, you know, because they weren't offering it on that car. So I go to my bank, Wells Fargo, and on their website they had a deal, you know, for customers to apply for a car loan, and it was like, you know, a 1.9% rate if you had a good credit score, and I have really good credit. And so I go in, I apply, I get the paperwork back, said, yep, you qualify for the 1.9, you know, take a couple days to get the paperwork ready, you can go into your bank and sign the paperwork and get your check. Great. So I go in a couple days later, I get the bank paperwork back, and I start looking through it, and I didn't have a 1.9% loan. They gave it a 4.9% loan. And I said, wait a minute, that's not what I signed up for. And they said, oh, well, that's just what it is. And I said, no, that's not what it is. I have the paperwork right here in my hand. It says it's a 1.9% rate. And they said, well, the paperwork's 4.9%. That's what you got to do. And I said, no, that's BS. I said, fix it. And so, you know, he gets on the phone, and, you know, they go back and forth, and they come back and they say, nope, it's 4.9. And I said, you know what that's called? That's called bait and switch. You can't do that. That's illegal. You can't bait someone with a 1.9% rate on the website, tell them they qualify for it, and come back and hand them paperwork for 4.9%. That's called bait and switch, and it's illegal. They said, well, take it or leave it. I said, all right, I'm leaving it, and I am going to make your life miserable, because I'm going to tell every person I come in contact with for the rest of my friggin' life about how you guys tried to screw me. I mean, this isn't the first time that you guys have got out of line. You know, you've been fined for opening up accounts for people that didn't want accounts. You know, you're morally bankrupt. You are morally bankrupt. And so I posted all over the internet. I got the Consumer Reporter from one of the television stations in Salt Lake City to come down and do a story on it. And I made their life miserable. And thankfully, they've had to almost pull out of our area because so many people were upset with them. They used to have 4 branches in my little area of town. They're now down to 1 in a little tiny shop because nobody was using them anymore. So, Wells Fargo, you're welcome. Anyway, virtue 12, right. Use the written word to define and refine your thinking. When we give words to ideas, they suddenly become real. If we can't clearly articulate what we have virtually no chance of success, which is why we take our time to write a concept. We don't just keep it in our head. When it lives up there, it doesn't exist. When we convert it to paper, now we can share it with people. Now we can get feedback to it. We can't do that if it's just living in our heads. So we've got to give words to things to make them become real. Writing enhances alignment because pictures are worth 1,000 words, and that's a problem because that's way too many words. When we think well, we write well because writing is about idea testing. You know, and that's why I took the time to try to teach you a good way of writing with the P&G one-page memo. Precise and concise writing, because in order to do precise and concise writing, you have to do precise and concise thinking. Stephen King, if you want to be a writer, you must do 2 things above all. Read a lot and write a lot. When you write, remember that writing is storytelling. Talk as you write. Don't try to write in someone else's voice. Write in your own voice. Read your writing out loud. You know, if you have a really important memo that you're sending to someone or email, print it out and read it out loud to yourself before you hit the send button, because you're going to find mistakes. You know, when we're looking at things on a screen, oftentimes we don't find the mistakes. Use Grammarly to help you sentence structure better. You know, use the technology that we have available to us now to help us write better. You know, and always tie to truth, because excellence is tied to truth. Our final virtue, number 13, courage. Be bold, be brave, leave a legacy. Winston Churchill. Courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees all others. You know, at the beginning of class, I showed you this chart, how if you push out to be significantly new and different, very new and different, purchase intent goes all over the map. You get a million ideas that nobody's going to buy. And then every once in a while, you get 1 or 2 up in that top that are really different that somebody wants to buy. And there's no system on earth for just coming up with those really good ones without coming up with a million of the bad ones first, which is why when we do things out at the ranch, we come up with 600-700 ideas and try to identify 4 or 5 that might have a chance. So, you know, you can't be afraid to have the courage to push out to be significantly different. Don't just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. Just moving the chairs from the left side of the boat to the right side of the boat ain't going to keep the boat from going down. You got to do things that are significantly different from what already exists. You know, don't split hairs. Nobody cares about something new to your company, you know, just because you're doing it new. You know, Hershey's a few years ago introduced a new product they called Tastations, the first hard candy from Hershey. Really? Hard candy's been around since the Roman Empire. What makes you think that the world is clamoring for a new Hershey's hard candy? And it was dead in 6 months. You know, nobody cared. Did customers ask for an electric light? No. They never asked for it. The producer produced it. No one asked for a car, a telephone. No one asked for a copy machine or a fax machine. Innovation does not come from customers. Innovation comes from producers, from people who are responsible for themselves and have only themselves to satisfy. Dr. Deming. You want to be successful in this life? The key to it is love. Success in all endeavors comes from love. Love your customers, love your coworkers, love your products and your services, and love leading. You know, a lot of people don't take the opportunity to lead. They're you know, and that drives me crazy, especially for students. This is a great training ground to practice your leadership skills, because let me tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy when you suddenly get thrust into a leadership role and you haven't practiced it. Take the time now to practice it. You know, think about a dog sled. You know, that dog out in front has a really important role. It's leading the sled wherever it wants to go. It speeds up, it slows down, it goes left, it goes right. That's all up to that dog. And that's a pretty cool place to be. Now, there's danger that comes with that. You know, if you're going off a cliff, if you don't see it, and you, ooh, ow, 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 and everybody else is landing on top of you, ow, ow, ow. Yeah, it happens. But I'd much rather be that dog than be any other dog in that chain, because every other dog in that chain has got their nose shoved up somebody else's ass for their entire existence. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that person. Be the person out front. Be the person that loves to lead. Take advantages of opportunities now to lead. Be true to yourself. In a study done of 1,500 business school students, they said, what are you going to do when you graduate? 1,245 of them said, well, I'm going after the money now, and then once I'm set up, then I'll go do the dream thing that I was thinking about. 255 of them said, no, I'm going after the dream now. Not going to take a job just for a paycheck. I'm going to try to make my dream come true. They were then checked back 20 years later to see what had happened. They were checked for millionaires. Of the 1,245 that had gone after the money, one was a millionaire. Of the 255 that had gone after their dreams, 100 of them were millionaires. Because they were doing things that meant something to them. They were making their own dreams come true. Learn. Our meaningful benefit and difference, our pioneer, overtness, clarity, and focus. Our real reason to believe is credibility, authenticity, and demonstrating. Our core values are persistence, measurements, service, and writing, all topped up by one big heaping dose of courage. Wisdom times courage is what builds a legacy. Knowing more and doing more is what leads to success. Our time is now done, but I just want to say a couple of things as we close. Number one, thank you. Thank you for taking this class from me. You know, I have worked very hard at it, and you know, and I appreciate sharing the ability that I have to share my experience and knowledge with you. You know, a lot of people ask me, why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing it because, you know, I had an incredible life. I had an incredible career. When, you know, I look back and think about the opportunities that I've had. You know, about 10 years ago, I had a little come to Jesus with myself, and I sat down and said, you know, what do we want this last portion of our career to look like? And I said, you know what? So much has been given to me, I think it's time for me to give back. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm sharing this with you, and I hope you found value in that. Now, you may think that this is the end, we're done, we're over, but no, we're not. Because I have a promise to make to you now. You know, you are now part of a very exclusive club of people that I call the Schultz Marketing Minions. And as a member of the Schultz Marketing Minions, you now have access to me for the rest of, I shouldn't say your life, I'll have to say my life, because I know someday I'm going to get all amped up in class and I'll go down and they'll go, oh, you know, he's looking very dramatic today, and I'll be dead on the floor. But, you know, as long as I'm around, you have access to me. I encourage you to ask me questions. You know, you get out in your career and you're 5 or 6 years out and you suddenly get faced with a challenge and you go, you know what, I remember we talked about that, but I don't remember what it was. Call me, email me. My email's never changing. It's always going to be eric.schultz@usu.edu. Call me, email me, happy to talk. Send me something through LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. You can always connect with me there. You know, use me as a resource because, you know, I'm happy to do so. That's what I've dedicated the rest of my life to doing, is helping my students to have bigger and better careers. You know, I want you to stand on my shoulders now and go even higher. I have shared with you everything I know about marketing. There's nothing behind the table. There's nothing behind the curtain. I've shared with you all of my knowledge. And I know it was a lot, and I know we had to work through it quickly, but, you know, thank you for staying up because, you know, I looked through the grade book and there's hardly a single late assignment turned in from anybody. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for your attention, and thank you for you know, allowing me again the privilege of speaking to you. When we started this class, I promised you the greatest marketing class on earth. That set an expectation in your mind. This better be good. I hope that the customer experience that you had in this class aligns with that. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best of luck. Good luck. Mahalo.